We're going to do a quick walkthrough here to show you how to machine this file using MeshCAM. I'll assume that you don't know a great deal about CNC, so we'll try to cover a few of the core concepts along the way. Okay, for step one, we're going to go define the stock dimensions. The stock dimensions are used to tell MeshCAM how big a piece you're trying to cut. So if you have a 4-inch object you're trying to cut and you have a larger piece of material that you're trying to cut that out of, you need to tell MeshCAM that, and then it can figure out how big to make the tool path to remove all of that material. What we're going to do here, we're just going to tell it, we'll let it figure out the overall dimension. We're going to go here and tell it to add 1/8 of an inch margin to the left and right, and then 1/8 of an inch margin to the front and back. And what that'll do is take the overall size of the object and just add 1/4 of an inch overall. And you can see that the X and Y dimension did update up here. The other thing we're going to do is add about 30 thousandths to the top here. And what that'll do is keep the top of the stock a little bit above the object we're trying to cut out so that we don't have to worry about the top being uneven. And when we click OK here, we can see that that white outline updated, showing the current outline of the stock. And if we look at the edge view here, we can see that 30 thousandth gap here from top to top. Okay, now we're going to set the program 0. And what that'll do is tell the milling machine where to begin. So by default, MeshCAM will put it in the lower left-hand corner at the top, and you can kind of see it hidden here in the corner. And what you'll do on your milling machine, when you put your material that you want to cut from on the table, you have to then initialize it to make sure that the orientation of your stock on your table ends up being with the 0 point configured right here. The bottom left-hand corner is a good place to begin by default. You can move that around anywhere you want. For our case, I'm going to move it to the middle of the object, and we'll keep it at the top plane. And when we do that, we can see it updated right here. Okay, now we can create the tool path. So we'll click here and we get kind of a wall of numbers that we have to plug in. Again, this will be a little bit MeshCAM specific, but I think a lot of the overall concepts are going to be similar no matter what program you use. We'll begin at the top here. We've got a tolerance value. And what that'll do is tell MeshCAM how accurate you need it to be. And if we have in there right now 1/1000th of an inch, what you're telling MeshCAM is that you can undercut the material or overcut it. You can gouge it by up to 1/1000th of an inch. Now, if you needed a highly accurate tool path, you could make that a 10,000th of an inch if you wanted. And the trade-off will be that you're going to get a much bigger program to load in your mill, and it'll take a lot more time and memory to calculate it. So you want to go to a good value that'll give you a good product, but you don't want to go too far because you're just wasting time at that point. We're going to tell it to machine the entire stock. The alternative would be to machine only the area covered by the geometry, and then we could add a little bit of margin around it. Okay, so now we're going to move on to roughing over here. And the roughing toolpath is going to be used to remove the vast majority of your material. When we look around the part here, we told it to machine the entire stock. So roughing is going to be removing everything around the part, minus some little bit. We're going to tell it over here how much we want to leave behind, but it'll remove everything but your core part plus that little bit to leave behind for finishing. We're going to do that roughing with a ball mill here. We've configured an 1/8 inch ball mill. The roughing is done in a series of passes that get deeper each time, and we're going to put 1/8 of an inch between each depth pass. We're going to do down here, we're going to do parallel roughing, which means that the part or the cutter will go back and forth over the part. So between each pass, we're going to put 1/10 of an inch. Then we've got our feed rate in here, which will tell it how fast we want to go. And then again, we're telling it to leave about 1/32 of an inch behind. Okay, and now on to finishing. The roughing we talked about, that removed the bulk of the material. Finishing passes, as the name implies, are on the hook for providing a good finish on your final part. Now we have a lot of options here, but we're going to go with the most basic to make sure we can just get a good part quickly without being overwhelmed by all of the settings that you might get hung up on. So we're going to go with parallel finishing along the X direction. And the picture here kind of shows you what will happen. We're going to go back and forth across the part, just feeding inward a little bit each time. We're going to keep the ball mill 1/8 of an inch. Step over, we're going to do 20/1000 of an inch, and then we've got a feed rate appropriate for our machine. Now we've got more that we can configure, but that would be optional. We don't have to worry about that right now. So we'll click OK, and we'll get a toolpath. And we're not going to cut away here. I want to show you how quickly you can get a good toolpath out. And here we go, a big mess of green toolpath. Okay, we can move that out of the way and take a better look here. If we uncheck roughing, then we can look at only the finishing toolpath. And that would look about like what you would expect based on that picture, where we can see the path going back and forth, going over the part. And there's not much to look at on that one. It'll give you a good finish. Roughing, when we turn off the parallel, you can see over here we've got the different layers that we talk about, each of them 1/8 of an inch deep, and you can see it going down the part bit by bit each time. So we turn them both back on, and then we can save the toolpath. And the important thing here, every machine is going to be a little bit different. So if you have a Mach 3 machine, an EMC machine, a Sureline, whatever you have, they each take a little bit different version of G-code. So when you save that file, you can click the type that you want. I happen to have a Mach 3 machine, but you can look down here and pick whatever would be appropriate for your machine. And then you're done. You've got a toolpath you can load in the mill and you're ready to go. So we'll go load it in the mill and show what'll come out. And here we are partway through roughing. You can see that it's getting rid of the material but not leaving a great finish. For that, we'll look to the finishing pass. And here we are about halfway through the finishing. You can see that a lot of that roughness is beginning to go away, and we're ending up with a pretty good part. And here's a look at the finished part.